Hi, I've done this presentation several times. I'm just going to jump right in. Team topologies applied. Let's just go for it. What you get today that the other audiences have not received in this presentation is at the end, I will talk about, well, how do you implement these things in Agile Hive? Boom. Okay. So, SAFE says all your Agile teams should have they should be cross-functional and have all the skills needed to deliver beginning to end value to customer. Wow, that sounds amazing. Unless you're building complex systems, you've got different types of engineering, different types of software, firmware. It can get pretty complicated pretty fast. So people say, well, should my information security people be a shared service in an art, across arts? Should I make feature teams or component teams? If you remember, earlier versions of SAFE really emphasized that. And then we talk about T-shaped skills. I had an electrical engineer once say, so you expect me to teach electrical engineering to the software engineers? And gave me the stink eye. And so it's not always so straightforward that we can just develop all the skills people need on a team. People also want to just start with Agile release training. Say, well, here's my division. I'm going to take this whole division of the organization and make it an art. And each manager is going to have their direct reports in an Agile team because we've got software engineers over here, front-end engineers, user experience, all on different teams, right? And so how do we make those cross-functional teams? What about, do I need a finance person on each team? Do I need legal? These are all very real challenges. Now, as a result of these kinds of challenges, well, let's consider this example, then I'll talk about the solution. So, this kind of challenge happens on almost every Agile release train I've ever coached, and it's a lot. So here's an example I'm going to use from a very large aerospace engineering company. I was working on the IT side of the house, and they had different teams supporting things like Outlook and Skype and internal products like finance, ERPs, right? And suddenly they were going to, not suddenly, but a big initiative was to move all of those applications from data centers into the cloud. Why? Well, one big reason was when we moved to the cloud, now we can get analytics and possibly AI. Well, there was a small subset of people who knew AWS as a cloud service, and a smaller subset that knew how to do analytics, and a smaller subset that knew how to do AI. So what do we do? And I purposely represent these as wizards. What do we do when we have this small subset of wizards who have a special competency? And then we have these teams that need that competency. Well, that is the million-dollar question. How do we organize that? So I sometimes start with a poll. We have a short time frame here. What do we normally do? Do we allocate one person with AI and analytics competency to each team? Well, it depends, right? It depends on supply and demand. Do we form a single team of all the people with the competency? And they provide that competency like a shared service to the teams that need it. I would say that's the most common pattern that I see. Or do we have the people with that competency create an as a service, like information security as a service, server patching as a service, and then they just, for like 80% of what they would normally do with that competency, they teach people how to be self-service. And then they support that so that the needing teams can be self-sufficient. I would say it's a less common pattern, but boy, when you do the economics analysis in some situation, that's a really powerful answer. Oh, so which of these do we pick? Well, there's a great reference here. A few years ago, team topologies was the hot ticket. It was all anyone was talking about. And so it was at that time that I did some analysis and read through this book and dissected every sentence, every concept, and said, well, how would I implement this? How would I advise my SAFe people adopting SAFe? How would I advise them to do this? There's a blog on organizing teams and arts. But you know what? They don't give you enough. They're like, you could have this option, you could use this option, you could use that option. But how do you pick that for your situation? And that's what Team Topologies Applied is about. Man, I love to take an economic view. It's what I do with all kinds of decisions that people need to make. And I said, well, how is Carlos here on the call versus Tamara going to know in their environment which option to pick? Well, I dissected the basic parameters. How many people with the competency do we have? I worked with an aerospace engineering company that had 7 thermal analytics specialists for a department of 200 people. Well, let's just go get some more thermal analytics specialists. Let's go down to the thermal analysis aisle at Walmart and pick up a few. Well, no, that's not realistic. How long does it really take to develop and maintain that competency? How much would it cost me to go get someone with that specialization out in the marketplace? Are they even available? Well, we have to look at that, the supply, what it costs to get more of that supply. And then we'd have to look at the demand. How many teams need that competency and how often? How long does it take? If I put in a ticket to ask for some information security review of my product, how long do I have to wait to get that help? How important is it for that person who's assigned to give me information security advice or analytics help? How important is it for them to understand exactly what my stream-aligned work, that means customer-facing work, how long does it take them to understand my context? What's the effort to understand it? And then this one is quite interesting. How critical is it that we have the consistency across all those different customer-facing efforts, known as stream-aligned teams? Well, if it's information security, it better be darn consistent. If it's thermal analytics or possibly AI, it could be more individualized. So there's a lot to consider. So do I allocate one per team? Boy, that would be the best solution. Why? Because these stream-aligned teams are providing value for the customer. Now, this stream-aligned teams is part of the nomenclature from Team Topologies book. So the closer I get all the skills to the group that's providing value to the customer, the better value I can provide to the customer in a shorter amount of time. That is the hypothesis around this. And if I had all those skills, that would be great. So, if our ratio of people with the competency to the teams needing the competency is greater than 1, yeah, it's the best approach. But if not, which is more common, especially when starting something new like AI, we have to understand how many would we need? What's the investment required to develop it? If that investment is unacceptable, let's see what's something else we could do. What do the Team Topologies guys say? Well, they say you could keep those wizards together and call that a complicated subsystem team. Thermal analytics, yes. Complicated subsystem team, right? Information security, maybe I have enough to assign one to each team. So this complicated subsystem team is going to provide help on demand. What's the challenge there? They're going to become a bottleneck. It is very likely, and I see it everywhere, especially like information security, right? If our systems aren't secure, we can't deliver them. Yeah, but if we have to wait forever to get information security help, then I can't deliver value anyway, right? So those are the ways we have to think about it. So let's think about complicated subsystem teams. What is the, we're going to talk about supply and demand, and that's kind of an economic view, but what's the cost of the bottleneck, right? And then we already kind of hit on this idea of, do we have to understand the streamlined team's context? What's the investment there? Because often what people will do is, especially I see this with information security, go put a ticket in ServiceNow, and the next information security, person who's available will assign to help you. But then your team is spending all this time getting them up to speed on what you're doing and why. So that results economically in rework and bottlenecks for the streamlined teams. That's an economic hit. And then sometimes we need to consider the need for discovery. I see this with that art where they were moving to the cloud, right? The AI specialists, analytics specialists in the cloud, or a small group that had to work closely together because they were kind of learning what's valuable and how do we do this in our organization. So the bottom line here is, if your risk of bottlenecks is high and therefore expensive, consider our third option. Competency as a service is what I call it. The as a service relationship between teams, the team topologies guys model that as a relationship type. But I felt it was more important to be very specific about the fact that these wizards, some subset of them, are going to have to develop and maintain and support this, let's call it analytics as a service. One group I worked with, we defined server patching as a service because they had a big bottleneck with the Windows server specialists and the Linux server specialists, and they were always imposing their own timeline for server patching and impacting significantly the streamlined teams. Well, what if the streamlined teams could self-service and determine where in their priorities and how they could manage their own work so that it doesn't impact unnecessarily, so it doesn't impact the value, getting the value to the customer. So I call this competency as a service, where we develop some part of the competency and enable the streamlined teams to be able to self-serve. And so this third model, this third kind of team, the team topologies guys call enabling teams. So you can have enabling teams other than in the competency as a service, right? We often see people enabling streamlined teams on DevOps solutions and that sort of thing. So this is another term from team topologies. Okay, well, if I'm going to consider competency as a service, I need to consider these sort of things. Now, I know I'm going fast, but the Jamal and Daniel and Carl are going to make this presentation available to you so you can play it back at whatever speed you need to digest these details. if I'm looking at competency as a service, I have to think about the economic parameters. What's the effort to build and maintain it compared to the economics of providing direct support? And this is where we get into the term cognitive load. And the team topologies guys use this term prolifically throughout their book. And that's, how much information do I have to have in my head at a single point in time, and to be able to, reach out and grab and put together the different parts of that at a given time. Jamal and I had a conversation about that this morning, didn't we, Jamal? Like the cognitive load of keeping up with all the details that you've pulled together for this presentation today, like the marketing events, right? So what's the cognitive load for the competency providers? What's the organization's, what I call collaboration load? Did you make that up, Cindy? Yes. I use the term collaboration load because it's that effort to get people together, to work together, to talk, to have a meeting, set up a meeting, reschedule the meeting, etc. And then what's the effort for the team? What's the cognitive load of the team? If I have to remember once a quarter what it takes to apply and test and report on my server patch, is that, more expensive or more risky than just having someone else do it for me and the disruption? So you see where I'm going with this, right? And I just have a couple of minutes to say, ooh, if we only had a tool to help us evaluate these things that you mentioned, Cindy, well, guess what? I love to build online value calculators, and my team topologies calculator / advisor has all these things baked in, and it's my most extensive online value calculator. It has 5 different pages. I'm showing you a screenshot of just the first page, right? Identify the competency, the scope, and the current supply. Then we talk about the demand. We talk about the fit for designated team member model. And it walks you through, for your situation, the analysis using the parameters that I mentioned here. And so I built this, I've tested it, I've used it myself with different customers. And so if you want to dig into it from the detailed economics perspective, it's more of a thinking tool than a spitting out an exact number tool. It's not like a mortgage calculator that's going to say your mortgage is going to be $1,019.87 a month. It's more helping you think through the different considerations and help you make a decision. Okay, now here's your bonus. That's right. Here's your door prize for attending with Jamal and Daniel and Carl today. What it would look like in Agile Hive? Woo! Well, is it in the backlog for Agile Hive to support this? No. You know why? Because it's already there. It's already there. If you have one specialist per stream-aligned team, you just put them as a team member. Easy peasy, right? If you have a specialized component team and you're only supporting one art, you make them a team on the art, because then you can, during PI planning, you can leverage cross-team dependencies. You could leverage a Kanban process to support on-demand work, but that's all baked in to Jira with Agile Hive on top of it. And lastly, competency as a service. Well, that's just kind of a hybrid, right? If you're only supporting one art, it's a team on the art that work to create and maintain the service offering. You put in your backlog, you plan it. And then your planned education sessions can be in the team backlog as well. A good, safe consultant, which I try to be, would tell you, target your IP iteration for the enablement training activities where possible. And then again, leverage a Kanban process for on-demand work. If your shared services team support more than one art, call me. Let's talk about the economics of that, because I have strong feelings on that. So there it was, Jamal. I got started 4 minutes late, and I'm finishing at 24 after the hour.
No worries. No worries. We really appreciate you for doing the coaching and learning, team topologies applied. If any of you found that very interesting and you want to know more, you can reach out to Cindy via LinkedIn, or she can drop her email down in the chat.